Welcome, everybody. It is amazing to see all you beautiful people. You make us very, very happy. I have two bits of wonderful news for you. The one is that all our content up until session 7, I think, is now available for you to go and review from a video point of view, the webinars, and then the content is available for you as well. And you can access these by going to our microsites, and our microsites URL is sme.henleyonline.co.za. That is sme.henleyonline.co.za. And if you didn't get that, please ask me in the Q&A, and I'll upload it there for you as well, and you can access it from there. So for those of you that missed our earlier sessions, you're welcome to go and make them up there. Those videos are now available for you. And for those of you that have been waiting for the content of some of our earlier sessions, those are available for you. So there's no reason to not be building those digital businesses, because you are fully empowered and can do so. The second bit of amazing news I have for you is that you are indeed now with us on session 9. Can you believe it? So the SME sessions, we are celebrating a milestone today. We started with you with 3 sessions around stabilize, and we looked at how to stabilize your businesses. The next 3 sessions were on assess, and we looked at how to assess options around how to potentially digitize your business. Or for some of you, it was at looking at exploring new possibilities for digital businesses. These sessions leading into today's session with Prof. Andrew Gottlieb is around how to pivot your business. So now that you've looked at these possibilities and these opportunities, how do you start to steer the ship in a whole new direction? Our next 3 sessions will be on grow. So stabilize, assess, pivot, and then grow. And I do quickly want to tell you what we've got coming, because I think these 3 sessions are also incredibly exciting. So tomorrow we have with us Alon Reyes from Reyes Corp. He is a brilliant and super experienced South African entrepreneur. He is a friend of Henley. We have a very interesting joint venture coming actually, which I think we'll be able to tell you a little bit more about tomorrow. And he's going to be talking about how to growth hack your digital business. So we're still talking about growing, and in a more focused way tomorrow. With us? Fantastic. Then session 11 will be with Adeyinka Adewale. And Adeyinka is going to be talking to us about African digital businesses. He comes to us from the UK. But he he is originally from Nigeria, and he has a fantastic perspective on businesses on local soil. So keep your eyes open for those two. I see that we've got Prof. Andrew Gottlieb's slides up already. Prof. Gottlieb, we can see you there, and we're going to invite you in just a second. Prof. Andrew Gottlieb, together with Prof. John Foster Pedley from Henley Business School Africa, together really are at the heart of what we're doing here, and therefore it is a phenomenal pleasure to have you with us today, Andrew. Welcome. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. I'm very good. I'm going to the weather is changing outside, and so the light that's coming through onto my face and helping me to see the screen is just changing a bit. So I might be wiggling about a bit, but it's great to be here. Thank you very much for having me.
Well, Andrew, you look quite dashing to all of us here in South Africa. We've been having a same kind of weather situation that you're having over there. You're going to be talking to us today about designing trust into your brands. And I think it's an interesting time to be having that conversation. And you're also going to be talking to us about alliances. Now that we have these businesses, do we or don't we form alliances with larger businesses? So Andrew, with that, can I hand these gorgeous people over into your very capable hands? Take it away.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Welcome, everybody. It's a great delight to just share some of our experiences from the Henley Centre for Entrepreneurship with you. I know you've had a good session over the last few days, the week or so. You've had lots of tips on how to move online, on online sales strategies, and remote working. And I think that as Louise was saying, that this is really now time for pivoting. It's time to think a little bit more about how we can look a little bit further ahead in the future, and how we can begin to take our existing business and start to think a little bit longer term. And so from today onwards, as we start to think not just about the bigger issues of pivoting, but also how to grow our business, I want to really introduce you to how you can begin to communicate really effectively with new audiences, new markets, and potentially about new products, new services, new businesses. So that's where we're going to go. I think that when John and I first started talking to you just over a week ago, or whenever it was, the mood was pretty dark. And I think that one of the things that's kind of happened over the last week or so is that we're beginning to see something of a light at the end of this tunnel, of this COVID-19 tunnel. We're hearing about countries in Europe, not the UK yet, but other countries in Europe that are beginning to establish plans for what's going to happen to get out of lockdown. How are we going to move away so that we can return to something, maybe not quite business as usual, but something similar to that. So something that is going to give us all something closer to a plan as to how we move further on.
Andrew, I'm so sorry to interrupt you from this side. What we're seeing on our screen at the moment is are your files. We're not seeing your actual presentation. What have you got up on your side?
Yeah, it's on my side. Sorry. So you can't see the slide that says trust, brands, reputation, and alliances?
That's not what we're seeing at the moment. Can I ask you to just close your file on your side? And what I can do perhaps is to bring it up on my side and we can play it from this.
Okay, I'm sorry about that.
Would that be okay? And we can try that.
I didn't put lots of photographs in, so it's not a bandwidth issue. Yeah, that's great.
What are we seeing? No,
okay, if you want to go to the slideshow, that would be great.
Stop share. I'm going to go there in a second. I'm having my own little technical issue right now. There we go. There we go.
That's great. Thank you. So, Louise, you can go straight on to the next slide. Thank you very much. There we go. Lovely. So today I want to spend the next, we've got about an hour. I'm going to do some exercises with you and try and get you to think a little bit about the way forwards. And for that, I want you to get into a little bit more of a reflective mode. So far, we've been very action-oriented, very practical, trying to give you lots of tips as to how to work forward. Today, I want to just try and pull you back a bit and give you a little bit more perspective to think very clearly about where we've reached and where we're going to be going in the next few months. Now, you all know that as we go through this crisis, what you need to do as leaders changes. And so whilst what you've needed to do over the last few weeks has been firefighting and stabilizing and getting everything together as quick as you can, now we can begin to see that actually what's required from you as leaders is changing a little. And what I'm wanting to ask you to do for the next hour or so is to embrace real honesty. Because the fundamental question that we have to ask ourselves as we begin to see that light at the end of the tunnel, as we begin to imagine what post-COVID-19 world will be like, is we need to really ask ourselves whether our current business model is fit for future. Is the way that we have run our businesses for the last however long it's been actually going to work in the future? And that's important because, you know, things have changed. COVID-19 will have changed things. We read about social distancing rules going to have to be kept on for a little bit longer until a vaccine is available. So we're kind of beginning to get our heads around the fact that some business models that depend upon lots of people being close together, well, they're going to have to reconfigure what they're trying to do. Other business models that might depend upon existing retail patterns or existing face-to-face interactions, they may have to change. So the thing that I'm asking you as we go through today is to think very, very carefully, be very honest with yourselves about whether your current business model is going to be fit for whatever future we're going to have after we come out of lockdown. Louise, would you like to go on to the next slide, please? So I say this because I think it's becoming increasingly clear that COVID-19 has acted as some sort of change. There is a paradigm shift. We are moving from one paradigm through a moment, a cultural moment, into a new paradigm. That means change. That also means lots of new opportunities. It means lots of new opportunities for entrepreneurs to think about and to embrace. We can just think of 3 major changes that have led to new opportunities just in the last few weeks. We're all now very familiar that COVID-19 and lockdown has meant that we're all online. We're all online all the time. And so that, of course, has presented a massive disruption to the way that we used to run our businesses in the past. But of course, that massive disruption as we go through that has in turn led to a new openness. The very fact that we are now meeting here together, all of the hundreds of people who are listening to me out here in Reading, outside London in the UK, in the Northern Hemisphere, you in South Africa in the Southern Hemisphere, there is a new openness to the way that we conduct our business. And that, well, there may well be some changes as we go through this time and into the future, but it's unlikely to revert back to the way that it was in the past. Secondly, I would say that there is going to be an increasing level of global connectedness as a result of COVID-19. Now, over the last few years, with the rise of populism, the rise of Donald Trump in the United States, and the Brexit movement in this country, there's been growing amount of evidence for an anti-global movement, for a reducing level of global connection. But COVID-19 challenges all that. It challenges that because, in fact, we all share the same problem. All around the world, we are all facing the same problem. And as it has been said repeatedly, we have to embrace the same solution. There is a level of global connectedness that is emerging now that we've not seen for many years. And that in turn represents a change, and it represents opportunities for entrepreneurs. There's the opportunity to engage with global markets in a way for small businesses and for entrepreneurs that wasn't possible, or was increasingly less possible over the last few years. And finally, we're all very aware that, you know, the role of social media has become so much more important than even before. So what does that mean for us as entrepreneurs? How can we embrace social media to get our news out there, our brand, our identity, our products? So I think that COVID-19, if we can begin to lift our eyes up, take a moment, take a deep breath, think about the future, if we can begin to look beyond the immediate crisis, I think we can begin to see that there are some real opportunities here. And so I'm going to take you through a couple of exercises over the next few minutes to try and help you to really dig deep into what your business is, what its business model represents, and how you can reinvent your business in order to exploit these emerging opportunities. And the first exercise revolves around identity. Thank you, Louise. That was perfect. And the first exercise is really to help us try and think through who we are as entrepreneurs. Now, many of us as entrepreneurs will have come into our business, come into our activity, largely through making stuff or creating stuff. And what that means is that we have a natural orientation to think about the product or the service that we deliver as being what we're about. Our identity is invested in our product. We are product oriented. Other groups of people tend to come into their business and they're much more people oriented. They're much more focused on how they can serve the people, serve their community. And so their identity as entrepreneurs is very much invested in serving their customer needs. And that's great. And you will have heard about the importance of that in one or two of the previous sessions. I want to take this thinking about our self-identity as entrepreneurs to a different level. And I want us to think about really how entrepreneurs do something more than just making stuff, delivering stuff, bringing stuff to customers, serving customer needs. That entrepreneurs really, well, yes, they make connections between the customers, but really those connections are connections that solve customer problems. And if they solve problems that customers really value, then that solution adds value, it creates value. So Louise, can we go on to the next slide, this funny little flow chart that I've tried to put together. So let's just move along this from the left-hand side. You see at the very left-hand side there, you've got customers or end users, and they have problems, desires. They've got needs. They've got things that are going on in their lives that, well, they want some sort of solution to. So if you go over to the right-hand side of the chart, then we see the box of solutions. Those solutions might be very obvious, or they might be less obvious. They might require some change or creativity, some innovation. And the person who finds what those solutions are and brings them to the customers to solve their problems, that's the entrepreneur. Okay, that's kind of familiar. We're familiar enough with this idea that the entrepreneur solves customer problems. And if there's enough value in the solutions, then that leads to the payments, that leads to the creation of some monetary reward to the entrepreneur. But here's the issue. What we know about consumers is that customers overwhelmingly they're really bad at actually describing what their problems are. They're really bad at explaining what their desires or their wants are. And so one of the real problems that entrepreneurs have is not so much finding solutions to existing problems, but actually finding solutions to problems that the customers can't really articulate. If you think about any kind of innovation, any kind of new product or new service that has been brought into the market by entrepreneurs over however many years, then one of the, if you start to study these things, then one of the clear patterns that comes out is that these are almost never solutions to problems that customers realize they had, but couldn't find the solution themselves. In fact, it's usually, almost always, it's the case that entrepreneurs begin to diagnose a problem that customers don't know they've had and design the solution to that. So that means that entrepreneurs have got this additional element to their job. It's not just providing solutions or designing solutions that add value to customers, but it's actually understanding and recognizing and describing the problems that customers don't always know they've got. So let's move on to the next slide. I want you to try and think about this. And I want you now to, Louise, can we move on to the next slide, please? So we'll have a little exercise for you. You can grab some paper or an iPad or something that's close to you, or open up a little tab on your screen and just do this exercise for a couple of minutes. I want you to write down your business name. I want you to write down who you're describe a few characteristics of your key customers. What are they like? Key categories. And then we're going to ask you to write down what your customers get out of your business. Well, you'll know pretty well straight away what it is. Write that down. But then I want you to dig a bit deeper. I want you to write another value that your customers get out of your business. And then dig deeper still. And by now you're going to be scratching your heads and thinking, oh, crikey, what do customers get out of my business now that I've got to think about further? And now I want you to start to think about your role as an entrepreneur, how you're not only creating value for your customers by solving their problems, the problems that they know that they've got, but you're also solving problems that they don't know they have. They're unable to articulate. I want you to spend a few seconds just thinking about the sort of problems that you're solving. You're bringing value to your customers, but these are problems that actually your customers really find it very difficult to articulate. I'm going to give you another minute and then we're going to have a quick report back. Okay, so 60 seconds on the clock, go. It's always easy to identify the first set of values for your customers that you're delivering, but go beyond that. What value are you delivering to your customers for problems that your customers either don't know that they've got or they can't really describe? Write those down. 15 seconds left. 10. 5, and stop. Okay. Feel free to just populate the chats, report back and say what you think you've come up with, because I'm going to take you through what I could have written. So Louise, could you go on to the next slide? And as I talk you through this, could people, if you want to just report back on the chat, just say what you think has come up that you've discovered about your business, that where you've begun to realize where you've added value in your business for problems that you know your customers wouldn't actually be able to describe that they've got the problems. So as you're thinking about that, let me just tell you what I might have put down. This is a hypothetical business called Andrew's Haircuts. This is one of the most basic businesses that I could think of, and I'm thinking that I'm going to be a barber. Who are my customers? Who are my end users? Well, my end users now are men wanting haircuts. So what's the value creation? Well, I guess the very first value creation, what my customers get out of my business is they have short hair, they get short hair. But then you start to think, well, why do they want short hair? Well, there might be all sorts of immediate needs in terms of comfort and heat minimization and so on. But of course, we very quickly get into the ideas of beauty, fashion, appearance. And so there is a value that users of haircuts get that is associated with these concepts of beauty, for fashion, appearance. It's more than just being very practical. There's something else going on here. So that the additional value, the deeper value associated with a barber's business now begins to move into the next group of values, which is about, well, something about fitting in with the crowd, something about cultural resonance, something about having an appropriate appearance for that particular cultural group. And then if we think a little bit further, then that actually becomes something that changes over time, that what becomes an acceptable appearance actually varies according to different subgroups in society, and it changes over time according to fashion. And so that introduces all sorts of interesting concepts like fashion leaders and trendsetters, as well as fashion followers. And so I can begin to see that at one hand, at a very basic level, the value that I bring in my business, in Andrew's Haircuts, is a value of giving short hair, of solving the problem of discomfort. But at a deeper level, a more advanced level, actually, I can see that my business, Andrew's Haircuts, is actually solving customer problems that are associated with deep needs associated with fashion and fashion leadership, with cultural, with problems that are actually very difficult to articulate, but nevertheless problems that customers are willing to pay to have solved. So, Louise, could we move on to the next slide, please? This is important because the ability to be able to monetize your business depends upon how you identify the value. Let me just pause there. Louise, is there anything that's come out of the chat that it seems worth sharing at this point?
Thank you, Andrew. I think that there are two interesting examples actually that come from our community. The one is from Claudia Pillay, who had a birthday a couple of days ago. So Claudia, congratulations. We're sorry we missed that on the day. She's from Kimzan Travel. So at the first level, it's corporate and leisure travel, then best fares, packages, then managing travel spend, and then finally do the recon for travel spend. And then Virash says his business is legal mediation services to the general public. And from a value creation perspective, at the first level, that is less spend in court, then less money spent on legal representation. At the third level, it's direct communication between parties to prevent written communication being lost in translation. And then finally, being a mediator is neutral and impartial. So the outcome is based on agreements as designed by the parties, making it more likely to be complied with, which I think is a fascinating version of your example.
Great, thank you very much. So keep those examples going and keep them coming through on the chat as you're starting to really drill into your own businesses and think about the deeper value that you're creating for your customers, and in particular, where you think that you're providing value by solving problems that customers find really difficult to articulate, difficult to describe. So if we go back to Andrew's Haircuts, we've seen as we've been down this series of orange blocks here, that there is a deeper and deeper need for solving a deeper and deeper problem in the end user value, going right the way down to a barber potentially becoming a fashion business. Now, if that seems a little bit absurd and a little bit crazy to you, I want you to, no, sorry, Louise, could we go back to that question, that slide, sorry. I want you to ask yourself a fundamental question about your business. So for this business, a haircut business, the question that I'm asking about my business is, you see there at the top on the right-hand side in italics, what am I hiring this haircut to do? Now, we don't normally think about things like haircuts as activities that we can hire because, of course, that's silly. We go to the barbers or the hairdressers just to get a haircut. We go to get short hair, or we go to get some service that's done, and we pay a fee for the haircut. If we're selling the haircuts, we charge a fee per haircut. And so the answer to that top question in italics, what am I hiring this haircut to do, is one in that instance that is dependent upon the answer about what do my customers get out of my business? What do they hire that haircut to do? Well, they simply get short hair. They get short hair, and so they're just willing to pay a fee to get the haircut, to get the hair cut shorter. But you remember how in the exercise we went through and we started to dig down and find deeper and deeper values that actually became values that customers found increasingly difficult to describe or articulate. And as we go deeper into the value creation process, then the ability to monetize the value, the ability to be able to gain revenue into the business changes. So as we move the barber's business down to a deeper value where it's not just about comfort of short hair and it goes into the area of appearance and beauty, then of course that leads to the ability to offer a range of different haircuts, a range of different designs, and the ability in terms of monetization to be able to differentiate the price according to the appearance, according to the design. Go deeper into what haircuts stand for in society, in culture, and how they become fashion-oriented statements. And then, of course, the barber's business is able to monetize this particular solution to this particular problem by selling associated products and services that are resonant with the answering to the appearance and the culture and the fitting in with the crowd problem. Go further, go deeper into the question about how the value is created, how the problem becomes a deeper problem, and how it's to do with trend setting and being fashion leadership, then actually we can start to redesign the business around the answer to what am I hiring this haircut to do? Well, if people are hiring this haircut in order to be able to become fashion leaders and trendsetters, then actually we can redesign our business around fashion leading and trend setting, and we can create a hair and culture business that is linked to a whole range of other sectors and a whole range of other firms, which are all aligned around fashion leadership and trend setting. And so the ability to be able to monetize the business and generate additional revenue into the business changes according to the answer to the question about how the business creates value for the end user. Louise, could we go on to the next slide, please? So that was the first exercise, just thinking about what it is that you do as an entrepreneur, what it is that brings you into the business and how you solve the problem of creating value for your customers. The second exercise I want to bring to you today revolves around a different identity question, which is, what is your business identity? And this brings us into the world of brands. Now, brands are really slippery concepts. There's a really simple definition of brand. Brand is legally speaking, is the legal term for trademarks. And so from an intellectual property perspective, a brand is a trademark. But we all know that brands are actually, they're much more complicated than just registering a design in an intellectual property office, because they're devices for communicating the identity of a business and what it stands for. They're devices for communicating what that business stands for, what the value that that business creates for customers stands for. They are devices that allow you as a business to communicate the problems that you solve to your potential customers. And so brands allow customers to understand how you are going to solve their problems. But of course, the problem, as we've just seen, is that sometimes customers don't know what problems need to be solved, or they don't really fully understand how they can, what kind of problems they have, or needs, or wants, or desires. And in many, as we've been saying, that it's up to the entrepreneurs to describe the problems, to diagnose the problems, and to be able to communicate their solutions to the customers. And that means that brands have to embrace a language which is ambiguous with customers, because what they're communicating is value to customers, sometimes that addresses explicit problems, but sometimes addressing problems that customers don't really fully understand. And so that's why brands are often communicated through symbols, through codes, through logos and visuals that have some meaning that is actually quite difficult to unpick. So let's go to the next slide and take you through another exercise to see if you're getting the hang of this. So this is a case study of a brand. You can see that black square with that funny little white shape inside. And yeah, does anybody know that? Let's see, how quickly can we get some chat up here who can say what that is? What company is that? It's represented by that logo. Louise, has anyone answered?
Not yet, but I think we know.
All right, everybody. I can see loads of chat going up. Actually, there
we go. Maybe I should scroll.
Okay,
That always helps. Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay, what is the key product that Nike sell? We all know. Of course, it's sports shoes. Can I just tell you something about Nike? Do you know, Nike, like any public company, they report their annual reports. They have a balance sheet and the statements. The most valuable thing, the most valuable assets on Nike's balance sheet is not their factories, it's not their stock, it's not their employees. The most valuable thing on Nike's balance sheet by a long, long distance is actually the goodwill associated with their intangible asset, which is the brand, and in particular personified by its logo, that black square. Nike is one of the most valuable sports wear good companies in the world, and that black square represents hundreds of millions of dollars worth of value. So now I want you to think about this, and I want you to ask yourself a question. which is how does that logo communicate the product, the sports shoes, to Nike's customers? What is it in that logo that is so valuable that is enabling Nike to sell its sports shoes to its customers? I ask my students this every year, and they also find it very difficult to answer. Louise, has anybody come back with anything interesting? How is that logo selling sports shoes? Can anyone see a sports shoe in the logo?
Susan says brand awareness.
But what does that mean?
And then the illusion of speed, says Chris, with a swish.
So
Recognition,
Chris
Gloria.
knows about this company. So what is the logo signaling about the value the product creates? Well done, Chris, big tick. Nike have actually trademarked the name for that white tick. They call it the swoosh. And the reason it's so valuable is precisely what Chris has said, which is that the logo is signaling speed. Why is that important for a sports shoe manufacturer? Well, once you begin to frame the question like that, it becomes really obvious. People want to either possess speed because they're directly interested in sports shoes for running, or indirectly, they want to possess the illusion of speed by wearing Nike sports shoes because there's something valuable, cool, nice about speed. The value that that logo is signaling about Nike sports shoes is that if you buy Nike sports shoes, you go quicker. Last question on this slide, everybody. Of all of the Nike sports shoe customers that you've ever known in your life, of which you're all probably included, how many of you have ever articulated exactly that value before you've bought Nike sports shoes? The answer is not many. Nike, a really well-established company with really clear marketing on a product that frankly is a pretty simple, basic product, recognizes that the way it answers its, the way it solves the deepest problems that its customers has, and the way it creates the most value for its customers is actually by recognizing that the unspoken problems that customers face, issues about wanting to look cool and speedy and possess this illusion of speed because it probably taps into deep cultural values of agency and independence and being strong. But none of Nike's customers would ever say that if they embarked on market research and asked them directly. The entrepreneurial aspect about Nike here was their ability to be able to diagnose the problem and then provide the solution. Louise, can we go on to the next slide, please?
Certainly.
So the next slide is introducing some concepts that we could go very deeply into this. They could become very, very technical. They're drawn from information economics and game theory. But to be very, very brief and very simple, all you need to understand about this is that brands overcome information gaps. And the point of this slide is to explain that information gaps occur between customers and producers, entrepreneurs, sellers, that Nike was selling something to its customers because it recognized what it was that it possessed, a sports shoe that gave the illusion of speed. The information gap there is that actually its customers didn't really know that that was something they wanted. There's an information gap that exists. And those kinds of information gaps, they occur across all products, all services, but in different ways. And so there are some kinds of goods that actually have very low information gaps when the products are sold. So if you look at the bottom left-hand corner of this 2x2, and you consider what we call search goods, they might be clothing, items of clothing, then what you have there is you have a group of goods that exist that at the moment of purchase, customers are able to inspect those goods and are able to judge, they're able to get enough information about those goods to decide whether they're going to meet their needs or not. So that at the moment of purchase, those category of goods, clothing is a really good example, furniture, there could be other examples. The customers have got a really good idea about whether it's going to meet their needs. There's no gap in information there. Customers don't need any more information to make their purchase decision. On the other hand, there's a whole load of goods and services that tend to be delivered over time. The value is released over time. So anything to do with property, building services, minor building services, things like that, where the value is released over time, then at the purchase decision, the customer can, these are simple products. It's not difficult to understand the property and the value of the property to you, but it's difficult to know what that's going to be like in the future. It's difficult to know because we can't tell the future. And so there's a gap over time between the purchase decision and the ability to fully realize the value over time. And so in those sorts of instances, people can feel that they can be exploited, they can be betrayed by open-ended contracts for example, with building services, they can get concerned that the builder may say they're going to deliver some services, but in the end, by the time the actual service is completed, they don't end up delivering. And so there's a gap, there's an information gap at the decision point, the point where the purchase is made, the transaction is entered into. Customers have a gap between knowing, having enough information to fully appreciate the full transaction and what they have at that initial decision. If you move over to the right-hand side, now we start to get more complicated products. So far, we just thought about clothing and building services. They're really simple products. But now move on to a whole range of products that actually become really complicated. Consumers can't understand them. Well, those are then products that consumers really depend upon the they depend upon the producers to be able to explain the products to them. And so at the outset, at that particular point when the customers are trying to make that purchase decision, there is a clear gap in the amount of information that they possess about the product and the amount of information that producers or sellers possess about the product. And producers have to overcome that. They have to be able to provide that information. And then finally, at the top right-hand quadrant, there are a whole range of products where they're very complicated, durable products or software products, where not only are they difficult for customers to understand at the point where they've got to make the purchase decision, but the value that's released over time is going to take time to release the value. And so they become really, really difficult products or services to be able to persuade customers to want to buy, because the information gap that you need to overcome there at the moment that you're persuading the customer to make that purchase, that information gap has to overcome their reluctance to trust for the future, but also their unwillingness to engage with the complexity and their unwillingness to risk making a mistake about a complicated product. Now that's a bit abstract. I appreciate that. It is derived from pretty solid behavioral economics theory, but the important point is that it helps us to understand that brands have to do something very, very fundamental indeed. They have to be able to persuade customers that they're going to answer problems, the goods that the brands are communicating about are able to answer problems, provide value to customers, even about problems that they may not know about, but also to do so in a way that creates trust. So if we move on to the next slide, thank you very much, then we can begin to think about certain strategies that can be incorporated into brand design that one way or another are able to reduce these gaps in information, reduce the need for customers to act recklessly, that are able, in other words, to increase the ability of customers to put their trust into those brands. So, for example, a really obvious way to persuade customers to trust you is to make a promise, to be really serious about making a promise about the problem that your product will solve, and to enshrine that promise in the brand. It doesn't have to be explicit. It can be a swoosh type promise. It promises to deliver speed. It can be in code. And so that is promising through the brand and through the logo that your product will solve their problem. You can incorporate into your brand demonstrations of competence. Lots of ways that you can do this. It could be through endorsements. It could be through other validations. It could be through the website showing, through videos that you're able to solve problems. But once again, what this does in the brand is it overcomes customers' unwillingness to trust, unwillingness to overcome that information gap, because it communicates that the product really does solve the problem. Another excellent way to design mechanisms into the brand, into the business model to reduce information gaps is to offer additional services. These could be pre-sales demonstration services or after-sales services to offer after-sales service. Why? Well, because what you're saying to those customers is that either through pre-sales or after-sales service, that we will show you how our product will solve your problem. We will show you how this will meet the needs that you have, how it will bring value to your particular problem. And so additional service offerings and the communication of those additional service offerings through your brand brings a lot of reassurance to consumers, increases the trust, overcomes those information gaps. Incorporating honesty, explicit statements of ethical value and what the company, what the brand stands for, signals to customers that you are trustworthy. If you're trustworthy and they put their trust in you, then you will help them to overcome the information gap. You will enable them to realize that actually the promise that you're making will be valid, that they will be able to unlock that value that is coming their way over time. This can be done in very practical ways. You can offer bonds to customers. You can offer a promise to repay them if they are unsatisfied. If you believe in your product, This is a really good way of signaling to the market that they can trust you, because it really reduces the cost of making a mistake to customers. If your product, it tells your customers that if your product doesn't solve their problem, then actually it won't be a cost to them. And then, of course, a really obvious one for companies moving into new markets and moving into with new products can do is to offer trials, test us, see if we work, check us out. We'll offer you entry-level discounts, and that will then enable you to test us without any significant cost to yourself. And so these are all ways that new companies or small businesses can either launch new products or move into new markets. They're all tried and tested, of course they are. But by thinking about how customers have problems that, yes, obviously they understand, are able to articulate, but deeper problems that they often are unable to articulate. And therefore how entrepreneurs, really the biggest service that they can offer is to diagnose these problems that customers find very difficult to articulate and provide solutions. Then communicating these solutions to consumers that don't really understand them requires us to overcome these information gaps. They have to be gaps because the customers don't know. They don't know the problems. And so these tried and tested techniques all can be explained by understanding the way in which entrepreneurs have to be able to solve customer problems, problems that they know about and problems that they don't know about. They are, in fact, all ways that allow small businesses to build reputation. The bad news, of course, is that they're all expensive. They all take time. None of them are easy. And so the final solution, or the final option to think about, is how small businesses moving into new product areas or new markets can actually shortcut reputation building through partnering up with existing firms, often larger firms, firms that already have reputation in those product areas, in those markets. Now, small businesses historically have been very risk averse when it comes to building alliances or partnerships with large businesses. Of course, if you're a small business and go into partnership with a larger business, then the risk is they'll rip you off. They'll steal your technology. They'll steal your customers. But thinking about the advantages of reputation building and the need to build a reputation in order to reduce information gaps and reach more customers quickly brings us to a point where we can start to understand the benefit of alliances and partnering with larger companies in a new way. And actually it begins to tilt that balance of advantage in favor of alliances and partnerships with larger companies. So, Louise, could you go to the last slide, please? In conclusion, I have got 5 takeaways for you. Number 1, it's time to reflect. It's time now for you to begin thinking about your business in a new way and begin thinking about the opportunities that COVID-19 represents. Second, the first identity issue. It's a difficult question to deal with because, you know, the reality is that if you want your business to survive, then actually your business is not about you. It's about your customers. It's about how you connect with them and how you create value for them. And so your role is to focus on where you create value in your business and how that becomes a deeper and deeper source of value, a more and more difficult problem to define and articulate. And the more that you're able to do that, then actually it should be possible to think of more and more additional routes for monetization. 3, the second identity issue, brand. How do you design your brand around the value that you're creating? Well, you need to answer the second question in order to think about how you redesign your brand. How are you communicating what your business stands for to the people it creates value for? Fourth, information gaps. Are your consumers able to get enough information to move them through to the purchase decision easily through your brand, through your website? Or do you have to create trust and reputation to persuade them? There are strategies, finally, to build trust and reputation. None of them are quick and easy. Alliances with larger organizations can build reputation quickly. They are worth thinking about. And so with that, I leave you these 5 takeaways, and I'm really happy to hand back to Louise.
Oh, thank you very much, Andrew. I have a question for everybody that is on this webinar with us today, and it is this: how do you build trust in your business? How have you in the past built trust into your business? And not just you as an individual, as the person that have jockeyed that business, but into the very fiber of that business, into the system of what it is. We'd love to share some of your thoughts, and then of course any questions that you might have. Let's hear what you've got. So Myrna Burns says, Braun says, a form of collaboration that SMEs use without having to partner with big corporations is to display their current customer base in their company profile or website and actual references from these customers. This gives them a less expensive form of credibility. Absolutely, that's a form of building trust. Have you come across other forms of trust building, Andrew, that you've seen recently, perhaps? You gave us some interesting examples also during our opening session a bit more than a week ago now.
Yeah, I mean, I do think endorsements are really valuable for any company, small business that's moving into a new market. Obviously, endorsements build credibility quickly. Having said that, it's also the case. The sad reality is that various websites, aggregator sites, recommendation sites have been abused. We know about the problems with TripAdvisor and so on, so that the credibility of endorsements and relying on endorsements alone is it's just not sufficient. There has to be other content in your brand, on your website, in your materials that reinforces the signal that says that you're trustworthy, that you're worth customers being happy to let you solve the problems. I mean, we've certainly seen several examples of small businesses in the UK in the last few weeks just suddenly popping up from almost nothing and just recognizing that there is a new problem that can be solved, and with little more than just putting something out onto social media, Instagram post, they've been able to reach thousands and thousands and thousands of people. So just capturing the moment with a new brand, a new logo, a new design that is then able to be reposted, retweeted, whatever it is, that really can be a very powerful way of ensuring that people will then trust you, because you just captured the moment.
Beautiful, thank you. Tiru Malarao says, by delivering the promises and commitments, this is how you build trust. Alison says, I build trust by saying what I do and by doing what I say, always. Very definitive. Nompu Malelo says, thank you. This was thought-provoking to my business. And how to deconstruct and pivot direction. You're on board, Nompu. Good luck to you. Positive product experiences is a good place to start. It certainly is, isn't it? And service experiences, for sure. Nadine says, always aim to have high quality taste, freshness, design, because this is something she does. Nadine, I'm so going to have to taste your cakes. I'm not sure how we're going to do this, but we're going to have to do this. John says, by giving written warranties for services provided and backing those up. Owen says, consistent service levels, constant communications, create value by addressing client needs, being visible, being there, being trustworthy. Another point from Thiru Malarao is by listening to their problems rather than imposing your product, and what your product can do for them. And that is pretty much where you started today, Andrew. So that takes it back to the beginning. Claudia says endorsement. Sam says, thank you for an incredibly valuable and insightful session. Much appreciated. Thank you for your appreciation, Sam. Zema says, by being very involved with customers, we create a very intimate relationship by communicating in a very relatable manner on social media and providing after sales services like checking in and providing guidance. And that is a deep relationship right there. Leanne says, building trust by doing 3 things. She says she uses Johari window as a framework, storytelling as an approach, and she's learned to share more by being about values and purpose at the appropriate time and in a personal capacity rather than just by credentializing. So there's a moment, there's timing. I love the storytelling element of what you say.
Terrific.
Absolutely.
I think that just one of the things that came up there that I would like to just respond to is, I suppose, thinking that promises are the same as contractual warranties. I think that for small businesses wanting to break into new markets, to communicate with different groups of consumers, assuming that customers pay much attention to warranties or contracts is really dangerous. And that's why I think this Nike swoosh exercise is so valuable, because it really powerfully explains that actually what Nike's able to communicate through that stupid little black and white logo is actually something deeply powerful about the promise of speed, which in turn signals something even deeper about, you know, independence, agency, fashion, or I don't know what. It's really deep. And so to come back to this idea of promises and warranties, we know they don't read the contracts. They're not going to read the warranties. What they're persuaded by is something that they can recognize, typically visually, where they can decipher the code in the way that we decipher the Nike swoosh. And they find that resonates with them. And that's the promise they respond to. It's not what's written on a warranty. So it's important for people to really think carefully about how they communicate with customers and to go beyond just contractual terms. In our kind of scholarly writing on this, we talk about the importance of designing implicit contracts, not explicit contracts, not the things that the formal terms of transaction, the warranties and the contracts, but these implicit contracts that we don't write, because if you were to write them and then to present them to a customer, they wouldn't really recognize them because they haven't actually articulated the problem. But actually implicitly, like with that Nike swoosh, we do recognize it and we do respond. So getting our heads around the need to be able to think more visually, more in code, is actually quite an important thing for us all to be able to do.
Fascinating. Very interesting, Andrew. Thank you. A couple more comments, I think, and then we're going to start to wrap up. Virash says, as the public is mostly unaware of my organization, fair practice and using mediation as a dispute resolution forum, I have endorsed the use of mediation through articles, lecturing on the topic, working on making mediation accessible to people as a form of digitizing access to justice remotely, which I think is very powerful and very true also. So that's a very different approach again. Nadine is inviting me and all of you to try her goods at www.alittlesomething.co.za. Shout out Nadine. Samantha says, thank you so much for a valuable session. Myrna says, thank you for a great interactive session, great food for thought. And I think soon, Myrna, you and me both, Nadine's great cake for thought also. Chris Adams, the swoosh represents the wings at the ankles of the god Hermes, the messenger of the gods. Chris, you really do know a lot about this company, we can tell. So, wow. Andrew, I think it's also an appropriate time to we're going to see you again in our final session, but I think I speak for everybody on this forum when I say we've learned so much from people in our broader Henley community, the richness that we've experienced and the generosity of people like Amal, Norbert, Yurik. It's been extraordinary, this partnership. It's been really rich. Thank you so much for your time and your generosity of spirit today. Thank you. We're going to play out now with somebody from nowhere other than Ghana, and I'm going to put her on. As you say your goodbyes, Andrew, and as I say mine.
Thank you very much. Goodbye, everybody.
Her name is Jackie, and she sings about control. I wouldn't be able to say the lyrics too closely on this particular forum for the rating factor. But I will say this, tomorrow we hand over control to you, because we're coming close to the end of these SME sessions and we're kind of wondering, how do we take it forward? Do we do masterclasses? Do we do an SME Sessions Plus, where we bring back some of the people that you really enjoyed but that didn't get to share everything that they needed to share? We don't know. You need to tell us. And where you're going to get to tell us is in tomorrow's session. We're going to do a little bit of a survey there, quick online one, because I think you've all been surveyed out. And we'll ask you to share your thoughts on the Q&A, and of course, as always, in the evaluation that follows too. Thank you for joining in. Thank you for your participation on the QA today. It is always incredible to spend time with you. You are remarkable, you are inspirational, and you are part of the Henley family. We love you.
Baby, just do me like that, do me like that. No, don't cautious, do me like that, like it like that.